guys, welcome back to BWDT. We're ISUTGC as per the usual. And this week we've got to sit down with a dynamic duo that make up a company called No Goblin. No Goblin have released a game called Roundabout, and I don't know how many of you guys have actually heard of it, but if you actually haven't played it yet, you're wrong. Roundabout is one of those games that is 100% worth your time. It is a game about the world's first revolving limousine driver. And it just gets better from there. It just gets entirely better from there. I really suggest checking out this game. Like, just checking it out the minimum. It's definitely worth like a Let's Play watch or playing it yourself. Roundabout will not leave you disappointed. Definitely go check out the game. But anyways, this week, the duo, who go by the name Dan and Panzer, they actually have something that we really are excited about to have on the show. They have a lot of experience in the game design in the AAA scene. They actually worked at a small company, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it, called Harmonix, which originally made Guitar Hero, then later Rock Band. But once they kind of had their fill of that, they decided that they wanted to go and do their own thing, and that's how No Goblin was born, and thus, trust me, Roundabout is great. But anyways, without any further ado, here's Dan and Panzer. So, to get this started, why don't you guys give a little bit of an introduction about who you are, the game you make, and why we wanted to talk to you.
Sure. So my name is Dan.
I'm Panzer.
And we're No Goblin. We started a little over 2 years ago after making AAA games for a bunch of different companies, and founded a studio in Seattle. And our first game is Roundabout, which is an open-world puzzle game where you're playing as a constantly revolving limousine. And,
with hot 70s FMV cutscenes.
Yes, hot 70s, the highest quality FMV cutscenes you could possibly get. That came out last year on PC, and this year we've been coming out on consoles like Xbox One and PS4. And basically we make fun games, and we do dumb side projects like the Men of Game Dev Calendar, yep. And generally we get paid to do dumb things, which is fantastic.
So what companies did you work at before you guys decided to do your own thing?
We've worked at a bunch of places. The places you've probably heard of is Harmonix, so the guys who did Rock Band. I worked at Twisted Pixel for a while on the Gunstringer. For anyone who is old listening, I worked at Pandemic Studios, which is the guys that did Destroy All Humans and games like that. And like a lot of those places are very AAA places. So like I think the biggest team, I think Harmonix was about 300.
Yeah, when we were at Harmonix, it was 300 people, which is enormous. That is a Goliath of a studio, even for AAA.
Yeah, I mean that's in one location as well. Like the Ubisoft things where you have like thousands of people across 11 studios. So yeah, it was kind of crazy, and that's actually kind of one of the big impetuses for. Me actually going from Harmonix to Twisted Pixel was I was a lead at Harmonix, and my daily schedule, like at peak, was like I had 45 meetings a week, and it was just insanity. And I would come into work, like when I started, where it was like a 50-60 person studio, and so like I got to make games, which was great. And then towards the end, like it was 300 people, and managing 300 people, it leaves you no time to make games, which is what I like doing. So it's one of the reasons I left there and went to Twisted Pixel, which was kind of a culture shock, going from 300 people to 12 people in a basement in Austin.
And now we're in a basement in Seattle with 2 people, so the basement trend continues.
Yeah, only for 2 more weeks, and then we leave the basement and go to ground level. We're going up in the world.
Are you guys getting your own studio, or not studio, like office space then?
We're looking into it. A lot of it's so. We're making another game. I can't say anything about it, but a lot of it depends on scale and our business partners, and a lot of boring stuff that's not related to making games depends on like whether we get office space or we do virtual office stuff and things like that. But yeah, we're looking to be a little more professional than sitting in a basement surrounded by ants and spiders.
Yeah. Actually, about that whole issue, I've heard about that issue before. I know Nintendo used to be really strict on having to have an office space, and like you had to prove that you had a lockable cabinet that you could keep confidential files and everything. is that's still the case? There's still you still have to do
Oh.
that, or
It's a lot better. The only thing I can think of is that some first parties require a static IP.
Oh God! And
so-
it's a nightmare. It's an IP nightmare.
Yeah, which is like it sucks because like places like Comcast, if you're residential, don't do static IPs, and so we had to get an exception to go through like a VPN with a static IP, and we pay like there's a whole bunch of like boring IT stuff, but that's probably the only real restriction I can think of. Everything else is just like a standard NDA of like, don't sell your dev kits, don't give people your dev kits, don't tell people what these are, you know, that kind of stuff.
And we are like a licensed business. Like we have a little business license hung on the wall.
Yeah, so like we're a legitimate business. And,
Yes.
But I'm pretty sure even if you're not, like even if you're just operating as a person, like Microsoft and like those guys will be fine operating like that. It's just a lot easier if you register like an LLC or a company.
Yeah, actually, I know for a fact that that's how Nintendo works. I recently got registered as a Nintendo thing, and for all our viewers out there, the 3 that'll watch this video, Nintendo has lightened up on that. Now you just become a registered thing. You have to prove that you have to prove that you can hold on to confidential documents, and you have to sign an NDA. But you don't have to be locked down in one place. You can now be a person developing a game. You don't have to be a registered thing. But that's something a lot of our members don't know about, is the whole what it's actually like to be a real company.
Yeah.
And so that's thanks for shedding some light on that. That is fantastic.
It's something that we didn't really know as well. Like we're going into it, like we've been making games for a long time, but like I've never had to draft a member agreement or like handle business accounting or things like that. And so like it's like one of the big things when we were making Roundabout, like that was our first game. We actually founded the business before we knew what game we were going to make, because for us, making it sounds really like blasé, but like making the game is the easy part for us, because we've done like making games is always brutally hard, but like it's a known quantity, I guess is a better way of saying it.
Yeah, like I've been in the industry 8 years now, and you've been
17,
like 100
18
years.
Yeah, when dinosaurs were running out.
What are you, like 180 now?
Yeah, I got an old beard. Like, but yeah, it's but like that was kind of like we wanted the gaming, like the game production side of Roundabout to be the easy part, and the learning about contracts and how long business deals take and things to be our learning experience. And so that's kind of that. Roundabout was kind of like our big learning experience on that, and now we have 2 years of business experience, and we can go through it and work on stuff better for the next game.
That was a good businessman hand gesture you just did.
This one. It's like Popeye businessman.
Actually, Panzer, I didn't really hear much about like your past stuff. Did you also work at Harmonix?
I sure did. I started in QA, and I worked in QA on the first Rock Band and the second Rock Band, and then towards the end of production on the second Rock Band, Dan took me as his intern into design, and that's where I started learning about being a designer. And I spent 2 years
Sounds about right.
On Rock Band 3 about, and then go ahead.
No, I just mentioned that you worked on Rock Band 3. Then I've played that game.
Yes. I worked on that game. Haha.
So actually, for our beginners, because one of the reasons I'm doing this is because we have a lot of beginners, and we need like professional exposure to a lot of our members to see what it's actually like. And you guys are great for doing this. For our beginners, what is QA?
QA is quality assurance, which is testing the game, which a lot of people are like, oh, I get to play video games all day for a job. That is not QA. That is not what you do. It is grinding your face against a game 10 hours a day and just brutally trying to break it. Like, every problem you can try to cause in a game, you have to try and cause. Like, it's opening and closing menus 800 times for an hour and then writing a report on it. Like, that's QA. It's brutal. It's a really good way to get into the industry. It's a really good way to learn about how games are made. It's a good way to meet people and see how the different parts of the industry work. Like, if you don't know what a producer does, well, you'll get to meet a whole bunch of producers and ask them questions. And
I think one of the really good things about your path as well is you were internal QA for Harmonix
Yes.
when you started, which is kind of you get super close contact with the dev team because you're all in the same building and you're working back and forth, and you have a path out of QA if that's not what you want to do as a path. Like if you're in QA for a year and you're like, hey, I don't want testing to be my career path, I want production to be my career path. After seeing all of these cool producers, you can find a way out of that in the same company, or or go to another company and say, hey, I have experience internally and working with people. I'd be good for like an assistant producer job.
Yeah, internal QA is really good. Outsource QA is still a good way to touch the industry. It's like if you can't find a developer job in-house, then and you're still interested in the industry, I would say that it's still worth taking an outsourced QA job. I
think it's good in a different way in that you're like if you're internal QA, you're going to be on the same game for like 18 months probably, which can be brutal in its own way. But a lot of outsourced QA, like you'll be shuffling between games every 3 to 6 months, or maybe even shorter, I guess. Yeah. And so depending on the company, and so you get a wide experience of testing different genres, different engines, different companies have different production methodologies, and so you're learning new stuff faster that way. So like they each have their pros and cons.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. I guess, would you have any... Does a lot of QA stuff happen on the coast then? Or, in the other major hubs? Like, is there really any way for somebody that's stuck in Iowa or Nebraska or Minnesota or any way to get into QA at all?
It'd be for a lot of it would be for outsourced QA, but there are some places you can do it. It's definitely a lot harder. Like the hotspots are like Montreal, LA, Seattle.
Yeah, but that really applies to any game job. Like having to move to a hub for most game jobs is the way it goes. But like there may be like if there are small indie teams that need assistance, you could always start there like locally.
Yeah, and there's a lot of publishers also have either for low cost or vestigially have studios like in like that aren't on the coasts. Like there's Activision Value, and like Chicago has a really good dev scene. And
don't recommend Activision Value to anyone. What are you doing?
Be very like in general, be very wary to going out with publisher QA because it's probably the most brutal QA path you could take. Yes. But like there's always people looking at, and even like indie QA as well. Like there's we know a lot of people who do indie QA, and we actually. We went with Tofu Testing, who's an ex-AAA guy who does indie QA now, and he's in the UK.
Yeah. Like he kind of specializes in the indie QA stuff?
Yeah. Really? And so that's his entire job, is like we send him a build, and he goes and smokes it and gives us a QA report, and we pay him some cash to do that, and that works out super well for us, because we don't have to have... Like, we have our own focus testing, but we can do, like, the brutal break this game testing. We can give that to a guy in the UK, and he can do that while we sleep, and then we wake up to a report, which is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I had never heard about that. That's fantastic. I didn't even know that was really an option. I guess, that's a good way for anybody interested in our area to try to get into QA, either finding if there's a few, like, small companies or whatever.
I think a lot of it is also like in any discipline is about finding, like there's always demand for people to help out on stuff, and so it's more of finding, like, not underselling yourself, and then like finding your niche of like I'm really good at fighting games. Say for example, it's like I want to help people who are like indies who are making fighting games. I'm really good at finding like exploits and stun exploits, things like that. I'm going to go out and I'm going to message these dozen indie devs. And, like, that's probably a good way. Like, if you don't have any, walk-in QA jobs that you can go for, that's a good way of building out a resume of, like, I did QA on these 5 games, and I'm going to give that to a QA company and go from there.
Gotcha. But going back a little bit, we mentioned smaller companies. Is No Goblin just you two? Or are there kind of peripheral people, like you mentioned the QA tester you have in UK, but...
We have a bunch of peripheral people. So technically No Goblin has 0 employees, which is like another business quirk. As Panzer and I are co-founders, and we each own 50% of the company. And then we pay ourselves through disbursements from the company, so we don't take a salary. A lot of it is just because we're young and like we're young as a company. I'm an old man, but we're young, and so we're not at the point where we feel like we can kick off payroll and have to deal with payroll the healthcare restrictions that come with that. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff. As soon as we hire one employee, it's more paperwork we have to deal with as a company. And there's also a financial point. It's like once we, hopefully once we make a ton of money, like it becomes there's a certain dollar amount of income that passes where it's better for us to switch to payroll than it is to go on disbursements. And so like there's a bunch of like complicated business crap essentially, but we basically take disbursements from the company, and then we have a bunch of other people who either on contract or like on some other way that we pay them help us out. So we have Glenda Morgan helps us out on Meta Game Dev, for example, and helps us out with PR stuff.
She's so great. She's so great at talking to people. She's
absolutely wonderful and like has a sales pitch attitude that I cannot hit, and so like it's absolutely wonderful having her. And so for stuff like Meta Game Dev, she gets a cut of the Kickstarter for all of her work for putting it together and running it and handling production and things like that. And like my brother did the FMV editing in Roundabout, and so our deal with him was he gets a chunk of the back end on Roundabout for each copy of the game sold, which is like a way of like making sure he sees some of that, even though we can't afford that. And so we have a bunch of people like that, and then
I need to point out before Dan lets it go that Dan's brother is a famous YouTuber. It's Beagle Rush, the guy who plays all of the XCOM super hard mode stuff.
He's the Iron Man Impossible guy that shames me at my ability on video games. But then we have a bunch of people like Tofu Testing, and we have a bunch of people who run their own businesses who we just have like a business relationship, and we pay them to handle all that stuff, or we go to Sound Ideas and like buy sound libraries from them. And so we have a bunch of like external people we just treat as like business to business transactions of buying stuff.
So then what are your two roles? What do you do, Dan, and Panzer, what do you do?
Make video games.
I mainly handle all of the art side of things, and Dan handles all of the code side of things, just because we generally that's kind of the way we bend normally, is Dan is better at math and code, and I'm better at like art and linguistics and stuff. But then like there are a million other jobs on making a game, so we sort of share them. Like Dan wrote the script and I edited the script, and Dan directed the movie and I did all of the props and wrangling people, and like God, you did the audio and
and like you do like a bunch of like PR and marketing asset stuff.
Yeah,
and,
I do all that marketing.
It's basically like there's 20 different jobs, and whichever one is the most on fire goes to the one that either wants to do it or is least dying, and then things kind of divide from there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we've been working together for a large number of years, so we're pretty good at delegating tasks between us.
We already have a good working relationship, so it's pretty easy just to like draw a line in the sand and like, okay, you take this, I take this, we'll charge for it and see if we're alive at the end.
Yeah, basically if it needs to be done in Photoshop, though, Dan just sends it to me. So.
Gotcha. So what are some of the kind of like background things that I guess somebody who had no idea what goes on in the actual industry would like know about? Like what are some of the jobs that catch on fire sometimes that you get behind on?
One of the last things that I did for Roundabout was make the art book, like making the, we had a bunch of bonus assets for the premium edition, and like the night before we shipped at 9 a.m. on September 18th, and at 2 a.m. on September 18th, I finished the very last page of the art book.
Yeah.
So like I never would have thought that was one of the things I would do, is making a book as part of a game.
And like while you were doing that, I was finishing up the launch trailer at that time and doing like there was like a last minute bug with terrain rendering that was fixing, and like there's like a whole like I actually have my email open like the kind of stuff that's like super random. It's like I'm talking with first parties about like Roundabout stuff. I'm talking with some crazy PR thing that's happening in a couple of months with Roundabout that's ridiculous, like just like ridiculous in the sense of like what they're doing. What else we got? Let me read my email to you. This is entertaining stuff.
But but
it's like managing like hardware
Yeah.
stuff, managing like press contacts, press keys.
yeah, Dan has to do a lot of video editing. Like, it's not really something you think about, but every trailer we've released, Dan made, like, from footage of me playing the game and just recording it with fraps and then just pushing it across Dropbox, and Dan puts it together.
Yeah, and
Really?
it's just a lot of great examples. We're in retail kiosks on PlayStation. So like if you go into a GameSpot,
GameStop.
Sorry,
You're so old!
I'm so old. It's been what 20, 30 years. I still
Let me
can't.
take you to the GameSpot, children.
But you can go into the store and you'll be able to see Roundabout, and that takes a bunch of we need to get them specific video encoded assets. We need to get them specific screenshots. We need to build out text copy. We need to do translations for French for when it goes to Canada. Like there's like a flow-on effect that is like there's like always a dozen things that you need to do to make anything happen.
There's literally always more things to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it. Maybe one day I'll find out about all that terror myself.
It's like good terror, though. It's satisfying terror.
Yeah, it's satisfying when it all comes together and like actually just a couple of hours ago, like I was just reading like my morning news and there's a PlayStation banner ad comes up and Roundabout's in it. It's like, oh, that's awesome. That's from that like grueling resizing of art that we did 4 months ago.
God.
I have to
No.
talk about Kickstarter.
I mean, we can still talk about Kickstarter, though.
Well, all right. What's your opinion on Kickstarter?
We do.
What's your,
we run yearly Kickstarters now for this calendar. And I think the best advice we could give is try not to fund your game with Kickstarter.
Yeah. Like a lot of it is, it's hard doing a game with Kickstarter, for a bunch of reasons. I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. It's kind of a complex issue because a lot of it falls on a whole bunch of marketing stuff like positioning and market expectations and things like that. And if you look at the kind of things that Kickstarter funds well, like the things that sell well are old ancient guys,
Nostalgia IP.
the nostalgia IP, like old guys like me pitching games we worked on 20 years ago, and also very small things like our calendar. Like it has we asked for 3,000, we got 7,000.
Yeah.
And there's a very small amount of risk in that, but it's a doable amount of money. And then there's kind of this middle ground, like from 30,000 up to 500,000, where it's basically no man's land, and you're basically stuck trying. You either have to lie about the amount of money you need up front, or you have to drastically scale down what you need to do to make the game, or you run a Kickstarter purely for press, which is a bunch of people we know have done, and that's not necessarily terrible. Like it's
not a bad idea.
It's a way for you to build an audience. Essentially, you're not using your Kickstarter money to. You're not doing a Kickstarter to raise money. You're doing a Kickstarter to build an audience, and that audience translates into more awareness and higher sales later on.
Yeah.
And so that kind of splits why you're doing a Kickstarter, and it splits the main reason people want to do a Kickstarter out, because there's no, like, if I want to make a game in a year on minimum wage, I'm going to need $60,000 to $70,000. Like with like a 2 or 3 person team, after hardware, after rewards, after taxes, like you're going to need a high 5-digit number essentially.
Yeah.
And if you haven't made a game before, you
slip.
You slip. Like you have no way to get that critical mass to get you over that line, unless you have something that is so. Unless you have something that is so amazingly ridiculous, and you hit like 5 like all planets align thing that you get coverage from press that is so burned out on Kickstarter that they delete Kickstarter emails immediately. That you hit at the right time that people aren't backing something else, or that another game hasn't taken press attention, and people trust that you're the company that you're the group of people that can make that happen. So it's rough. Like, I mean, that's the short thing.
Yeah.
It's basically rough. Kickstarter is great if you're targeting certain if you want to fund a game a certain way, or if you want to build an audience a certain way, but it's not like this magic bullet where you're like, I'm going to make a game and I'm going to pitch a Kickstarter and it'll be all roses and happiness. Like it's
a lot more difficult than you think.
And it's a bigger time sink as well. Like
oh god, there's so many. So being chained to backer rewards is difficult, and I cannot imagine being chained to backer rewards while in development of a video game.
Yeah, like for Men of Game Dev, like we're a 200 person Kickstarter. Like it's pretty small in the grand scheme of things. So we handle our own fulfillment. We handle Glenda handles it now, which is fantastic.
Oh,
but
thank God.
One of the reasons we brought on Glenda is that it's just a time sink. Like it's at least a couple of weeks prep before the Kickstarter, plus someone who has to run the Kickstarter while it's going on. Then handling order production and fulfillment.
Well, first of all, you have to design the things you're going to order, and then you have to price check like different merch companies against each other and see if you're getting the best deal, and then you have to order samples, and then you have to order the actual inventory, and did you order too many, and then you have to sort them, and then you have to address all of them.
You have to ship out, a couple of hundred envelopes through the post office, which they get really mad about when it's Christmas and you're shipping 200 man calendars across the counter.
Yeah, they got really mad at us.
But like we're a small project, and so like that was the kind of thing where I think we ended up just taking off a couple of days. In 2013, we just took off a couple of days from Roundabout Dev. In 2014, we'd actually already shipped PC, and we took off a couple of days from Xbox Dev to ship it out. And so part of bringing Glenda on for the 2015 calendar was so that we didn't have to necessarily lose like a week of time. But if you multiply that to games, like the numbers I hear from people who do like high 5, low 6 number Kickstarter games is you need at least a month of prep beforehand because you're building a huge trailer. You need the month afterwards. You need the month during. And then you need someone dedicated for backer updates so people don't get antsy, and for building backer update assets, and for managing 10,000 rewards and the logistics of shipping 10,000 statues from China. And
I cannot even imagine.
Like it's a full-time job essentially, and that's the other thing that goes against a smaller full-time dev doing it, is that to do that, you need to budget time to do it, which means you need more money to offset the time that you're doing that, which means you need to increase the amount that you ask for if you're not lying about the amount of money you need, which makes it impossible to get the Kickstarter.
Gotcha. So actually, the one thing that I know it's you guys that I wanted to ask this now, but what was it like actually porting from a PC game to a console game? Are you guys on both Xbox One and PS4? I know you're on PS4. I can't remember.
Yes.
Xbox One.
PC, Mac, Linux, Xbox One, PS4, and coming soon to PS Vita.
Yeah. So, I didn't know about PS Vita. Good job. But what was it like porting to the consoles? Was it hard, challenging? What's your initial thoughts on it?
I think it was easier for us, because we've shipped like half a dozen console games before. So like the thing that bites people going to console for the first time is part of it is cert requirements, and like having to know ahead of time what your cert requirements are helps you a ton. So like a great example is our leaderboards. Before we wrote one line of code for our leaderboard stuff, we knew that on Xbox we needed to leave space for a button to bring up the gamer profile. And so like we designed all of our UI and all of our interactions to make it so that when we got to Xbox we could just put that button in and just have it work.
Yeah, but we only knew that because we'd had experience shipping a game on Xbox with leaderboards before.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. If you had more to say.
Like, so it's a lot of the prep for us, a lot of the stuff that sucks on console is stuff that we knew was going to suck on console. And so we prepped for our cert requirements on both consoles way ahead of time. We made it so that when we flipped over and started doing the port, so that it was easy to slot in the platform-specific functionality. We knew cert was going to be, like, we knew ahead of time to plan to fail cert, because everyone fails cert. So we planned our schedule to take into account for that. Beyond that, like we use Unity as our base technology, so a lot of the things that usually kill people in terms of like platform stability or like porting to a different architecture, we kind of had taken care for us, which is good because we don't have any programmers to fix that otherwise.
You're sort of a programmer.
I'm like a pretend programmer.
Yeah, but Unity makes everything a lot easier for us.
It's definitely not a magic bullet. Like, you can't just go build for Xbox One and everything's fine. Like, you have to handle, like, all the process management and user management and cloud saves and, like, a lot of things you still have to do code support for.
But it's certainly a start.
It's better than it was 5 years ago.
So now 2 questions. What you mentioned cert? What is cert?
So if you want to ship on a first-party console platform, you need to pass... There's a whole bunch of stages. Like, at the very start, you need to have your game concept approved. So Sony or Microsoft, you'll send them a form saying, hey, this is Roundabout. It's a dumb game about a limousine. And they were like, great, we definitely want that on our multi-billion-dollar platform. And so
Definitely.
And so they'll say, this is great. This is definitely a game you can make on us. Here's your dev kits. And so you go through, you make the game. And then at the other end, you have to pass their certification rules, which is about 100 to 200, depending on the platform, and also on the context, different rules that you have to adhere to if you want to sell on their platform. So there's a lot of simple things like the game can't crash, which, and then there's like a lot of, like, it gets more specific as things go on. It's like, if you're quitting the game, you have to tell people that they're going to lose progress if they're about to lose progress.
Yeah,
or
like if the game loads for more than 15 seconds, you have to have an animated loading icon to indicate that it hasn't crashed, like stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's basically a bunch of things to make sure there's a consistent experience for all the games on the console. Consistent messaging, like on the PlayStation, we have to say if we call PlayStation Network PSN in a very specific way, or we have to call Xbox Live something in a very specific way. And then they get down, so like 95% of those are great, and then there's like a 5% that kind of kill everyone, where it's like kind of ambiguous wording, and you have to go back and forth, or maybe ask for a waiver if your game is unique. Like on Rock Band, we had to ask for a waiver for a Xbox 360 requirement that said you could play all game modes with any controller. Which obviously you can't do, like, you can't sing with a drum kit. So we had to go and say, hey, this obviously doesn't apply for us, can you make an exception in our case?
Yeah, I think another waiver Rock Band had to have was the music player on Xbox 360. Like, you had to be able to mute any game and play the music player over it, and so we had to get a waiver for that for, I think, everything outside of the menus.
Yeah, we basically, you could have your own custom soundtrack in the menus, and then we turn that off so you can actually play the game. So basically, you have to adhere to these rules. And then to release, you book a time with the first-party QA team and give them the game, and they basically play the game for 5 days and make sure you adhere to all those rules. Some platforms also just do a standard gameplay test on top of that, although that's becoming more and more rare these days because there's just so much content coming through.
Yeah.
And then they give the thumbs up and say, yep, that's great, and then you book your release date and do your press and cross your fingers.
So then my second question was, is it literally just like a rule book that you get or like print out, or just like a giant PDF that has all these different rules?
It's a
that you
PDF!
have to follow?
Depends on the platform, but yeah, it's a giant PDF, and then they update the PDF every 6 months to a year.
Really?
Some it's weird. Like some companies have PDFs, some people ship in like the Microsoft Help format.
Oh my god.
Which is super weird. But like there's always it's basically as a digital document. You go to the developer portal and you bring down the rules and you go through and check them off. And they also have test plans as well, which is super useful. So you can see the exact test path that first platform QA will go through to verify this test, which is super useful when you've got like those ambiguous rules that you have to adhere to.
Gotcha. So, is there anything like that for Steam when you release on PC? Is there guidelines you have to follow for a PC release?
There is, but not for the game.
So, there's guidelines for basically the things I had to do. There's guidelines for the trading cards, the Steam achievement icons, the emoticons, and the backgrounds. Basically, like somebody quality checks them. And so, for the trading cards, I took still photos of all of our actors, and then I like really crumbly cut them out and put them over stock photos, so they're like these like really goofy looking things. And then for Jeffrey, our skeleton man, I was like, I'll just take a screenshot from the game, that'll look great. So I did that, and I submitted our cards, and we got one back that's like, hey, the Jeffrey card looks really bad, could you do a new one that's not so awful looking? It's a screenshot from the game.
But yeah, that was like a scramble in mid-August, where we basically pulled Jeffrey out onto our porch out the back and like took some photos of him and like photoshopped him in front of a beach.
So he'd lost his arms by then, so we couldn't take a full photo of him. So I tweeted it. There's a photo of Dan taking a photo of Jeffrey on our porch, and it's just like the shoulders up of Jeffrey, and then I photoshopped it onto a beach.
It's pretty
professional quality.
But talking about Steam, the nice thing about that on the game side is for Xbox and Sony, like our final code went up weeks to almost a month away from our release date. Mm-hmm. Whereas on PC, the final code for Roundabout went up 6 to 7 hours before our release date.
I mean, that's arguably good or bad.
It gave us more time to make the game, but like, it's also good for updates. Like we've had a bug that we fixed on day one that we fixed and turned around and got up in half an hour. Whereas if we wanted to do that on a console platform, it's like a week minimum for us to book a slot for our patch, have the patch go through QA, put the release date up. Like there's more time to get it through, but also there's more likelihood that you have less of those issues to deal with.
Yeah, let's be clear that every time a game is patched, that patch went through the same certification process as the actual game. So that whole thing that we just described, every patch has to go through.
Yeah. With the release date, things are a little easier because you can just say, now, go get it out, kind of thing.
Yeah. So which one do you guys prefer? Do you prefer console development or PC, or is there not really one that you guys prefer at all?
I think there's both. There's parts of both that are good.
They both have pros and cons. Specifically, having consistent hardware for consoles is really good because we had a hardware bug on PC for people with a very specific ATI card, which there's no way we could have known that this one type of ATI card has a problem, or AMD card, I guess now. I'm old.
Yeah.
But
it was a bug with AMD 5650 and 5700 cards. So like we bought a 5450 to test and it never came up.
Yeah.
And it was that very tiny subset the video driver would crash every 10 minutes. And we had no way, like we can't buy those cards anymore. Like, you can't go to Amazon and buy a 5650.
Yeah, it's a 10-year-old card.
Or it was like, I think it's a little younger than that, but yeah, it's an old enough card that you can't buy them anymore. Yeah.
But that's not a problem you would ever have on a console, because all consoles have the same hardware.
Yeah. So like you can optimize a lot better as well for the hardware as well.
Yeah.
Like if there was a way to get the fast pipeline of Steam deployment with console hardware, that would be my dream platform. Because then it's like I love making console games. Like I love how I'm playing on a TV. It's my heritage of video game making and playing, and so like those are the kind of games I want to make.
Yeah, but getting through CERT is a nightmare.
Yeah, CERT is a hell nightmare that we all enjoy.
It's awful. CERT is always awful. It doesn't even matter which first party we're talking about. It's all of them. It's awful.
and like just to clarify on that, because it's like the people who work at first parties are wonderful. Like they're all fantastic, and the people who work like through CERT and QA are really nice people, wonderful people. It's just like. It's having to go through a process of certifying anything is rough. Like, you could go to the DMV and have the nicest people at the DMV, but the
DMV still sucks.
You're still at the DMV.
Oh yeah, I don't have a personal problem. I don't have a problem with any of the people who worked with us. They were all spectacular.
Yeah.
But it's just really hard.
It's a process issue, not a people issue, essentially.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thank you for clarifying. I don't want to sound like a jerk, because everybody who works with us is so nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I really don't have any more. Oh wait. Actually, I do. And this one, I don't know. This is kind of it's a very broad question. But do you guys have any advice for somebody who is college age and potentially thinking about it after college, but would want to start their own company or make their own games as a two-man team? Do you have any advice for them, or what's your advice for them?
My advice for them is to make games, but figure out a way to do it on someone else's money, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Like if you can make games like as a hobby and like learn that skill, or if you can go and get like an assistant design or assistant code or assistant production job and learn, like there's a huge amount of game development internal knowledge of studios that isn't propagated out. Mm-hmm. And so there's like lots of tricks on game development and like doing a schedule and things like that you're not going to learn from Gamma Sutra, or you're not going to learn from like Twitter.
Yeah, it's not even something you could learn. Like we're happy to answer any questions that anybody wanting to get into game dev has. Like we will always facilitate that. I love seeing new blood get into the industry, but it's just like not something we can explain. Like the experience of working at a studio is so different from anything we could describe.
It's basically you're getting a free degree in learning how to make games.
Yeah,
and it's something that I don't think there is an educational equivalent for. Like the closest I can think of is DigiPen, and even then, that's not the same thing. Like it's not even in the same ballpark.
Yeah,
it's like there's things you can only know by doing the trade, and that's if you can learn those things, like learning those things on your own money
sucks.
Is almost suicidal.
It just sucks.
Like it's possible, but it sucks because like you need like I said at the start, like when we started making Roundabout, we had the game bit on lock relatively, and we wanted to learn the business side of things, and having to learn those things side by side is probably the most brutal way I could think of doing that. Like if you can spend a couple of years making games and by putting them up on itch.io, or like just making free games and not having to worry about the positioning or marketing or having them having them financially support your life, that is amazing. Or if you can get a job at a studio and learn from people who've been making like teams that have been working together making games for decades, and learn how to make games from them before you go out and make your own games, like make your own like self-funding games, I should say. Like those are the best ways I would recommend going through it. Just because like the indie space that the indie space that also provides your food and rent is brutal. Like it's absolutely brutal, and that's like we've been making games for
a long time.
80 million years now, and like even then, like it's a brutal landscape for us. Like we're competing against 6,000 games on Steam. We're competing against games coming out every week on consoles, and even though we have we have an incredibly unfair advantage on this field, in that I worked with John Draker Harmonix, who's now the director of product development at Sony, or we got E from Xbox Live to be in our game, and that he's like friends with us, but he's also a direct contact at Microsoft for us. Like that we've built that Rolodex of people in the industry to help us go through, and that's something you can only get by existing in the industry. So like not having that advantage and going into self-funded indie is brutal. Like I'm not saying it's impossible, because of course it's possible. You can line up, you can have all the planets align, and you can make the right mistakes and still survive, but there are better ways to do it, and it's better to spend someone else's money to do that than your own money.
Yeah. Basically, you're always going to make mistakes when you're learning literally anything, and especially game dev, you will make tons of mistakes, and it would be best for someone else to be paying your rent while you make the mistakes, basically.
Yeah.
Like, you just gotta learn it.
You've got to make a lot of mistakes and learn from them, and that's actually some of the best business advice I got before we started No Goblin was make sure you have enough money to make 2 games, because you're gonna make enough mistakes on the first one that you need to be able to learn from those and make a second one. And that's well, like I'm glad we did, because like if we'd only had enough money for Roundabout, like Roundabout pays our bills right now, pays our rent, but like if that was the end of our runway, it would be an incredibly scary way to live.
Yeah, that'd be terrifying. So that's pretty much all I had to ask you. We've been going for a while now. But to finish up, this is our favorite question to ask everybody that we ever talk to in this. But what is your guys' favorite game ever of all time?
Rick!
See, I can give a top 5 easily, but you want to do your top? You got one?
Mine has to be Ocarina of Time. Like, I know it's a stereotypical answer, but I was 10 years old when Ocarina of Time came out, and that it molded my entire outlook on, like, fantasy and adventure games, and, like, it's just so good! It's so good! God! What a good game! What's yours?
I'm gonna cheat.
What?
My top game as a developer is Super Mario World, because it's Super Mario World is almost a perfectly designed game. Like it's the game that originated Miyamoto help with the squares. Like it has an amazing, like, the way it teaches and the way it paces and the way it encourages exploration but still is completely intuitive, and the way all of those mechanics tie together is like a mastercraft in 2D platform design. And it's the closest you can get to like a Bible of design. And I as a designer, like that, and to a lesser extent Mario 64, like they're these like foundations of how I see games.
That's like one of the reasons I think Ocarina of Time is so good, is it takes all the lessons that they learned in Mario 64 and just refines them to just like a beautiful point, and it's so good. As
me, the person who doesn't make games, Midwinter 2 for the Amiga.
I'm sorry?
Midwinter 2 for the Amiga. It's amazing. It's by a Mike Singleton game that came out in 1991, and it's an open world game made in 1991 where you can drive like 40 to 60 different vehicles, and you play as a spy, but you have the ability to get arrested and like thrown in jail, and you're literally thrown in jail, and you have to like flirt or bribe with the guards to escape this jail.
Your square gets trapped with all the other squares.
Yeah, your big square gets trapped with the blue square on the orange square. No, it's all polygons. It's
oh wow!
It's a polygonal world in 1991 on the Amiga. And
that's impressive.
The frame rate is terrible. It's like the amount of systems. Like I'm kind of a systems nerd, like deep down, and like the way that all of those systems work together, and like on top of that, you have a meta game. Like this whole thing takes place across 40 different islands, and you're basically you're on one side, and there's this armada of ships coming in on the other side, taking over the islands, and you're having to make these strategic decisions about, do I liberate this island to rescue these people, or do I do this other thing to like block off the route of these other things? There's this meta game on this huge. It's insane how many systems are going on, and it's one of my favorite games. And I'm really sad no one's ever made a game in that mold since. Like GTA is the closest, and that's like not even close. Like in terms of like the scope of systems and stuff going on in that game. And unfortunately, Mike Single just passed away, so he can't really make one himself. So it's an amazing game, and it's one of the games like you come back to like of games that's full of systems I just love tinkering around with.
Wow, I've never even heard of that game, so probably gonna.
It's an Amiga game, so it's only like old people from the '80s who weren't in America.
Hey guys, welcome back to Endslate. Thank you so much for watching this episode once more. Dan and Panzer are seriously great people, and they are as much about educating people in the game design industry as much as like we are at ISCGDC. They are seriously great people. They are fantastic in so many different ways. Definitely check out Roundabout, because Roundabout is so... I'm so annoying, I know, but trust me, Roundabout is so worth it. It's so funny. It's so... I freaking love Roundabout. But yeah. And in case any of you were wondering, I know my beard and my hair kind of don't look the greatest. It's No Shave November, so it's whatever. So again, make sure to share this video with anybody who's interested, or don't. We're not your mom, so do whatever. But also, don't forget to check out the Yeti for all the fantabulous reasons I've ranted about or raved about in the end before. Just, yeah, I don't know. You guys know why I love it. Signing off.
Revolving limousine driver, I will crush your precious limousine last.
You got this, baby. Teach this Eiffel turkey a lesson.
With a limo license, the world was Giorgio's oyster. Passengers everywhere would experience a true revolution in transportation. But at what cost?